Greetings. I guess I should say up front that I'm new here, so be patient with me, as I don't know all the rules or ethique or whatnot. A friend of mine linked me to this board after I told him the story and showed him the materials I'm about to share with you. He thinks some of you will appreciate it, but to be honest, from where I'm sitting, this site seems more like a haven for idiots than a serious paranormal image board. Whatever. I'm motivated to share this stuff and need to do so anonymously, for reasons which will become clear. Technically, I'll be breaking the law, but if I understand how this place works, then this thread will disappear in a day or so anyway. Here's the deal. I'm a production editor at a small independent publisher in the US. I won't say which or where, so don't ask, as I like to keep my job. The pay isn't that great, but it's an easy gig, and I like the people I work with. A lot of what we publish are what you would call coffee table books, the kind people will flip through when they're bored, but almost nobody ever cares to actually read cover to cover. Bland pictorial histories of certain places or states that sell well in regional gift shops. The occasional book of map or a biography. Few museums outsource their gallery and catalogs to us. That kind of thing. The work is boring, but it's steady and we get enough jobs and our books make enough money to stay afloat. Which is a lot more than what most small presses can say these days. Because we've been around for a while, our name is somewhat known to history buffs and people who think they're an expert on such and such town in nowhere, Idaho, or some exotic topic that nobody really cares about. We get a lot of unsolicited manuscripts from people that really shouldn't be writing books, and unsolicited CDs full of photographs from people that shouldn't be taking pictures. Because we're small and don't have a separate acquisition editor's position, the job of going through this slush pile gets passed around the office. Very rarely somebody will find something worth pursuing and pitch it to the rest of us, but our senior editor / publisher gets the final say. For the last 9 months, I've been working more or less non-stop on a book that everybody at the office was pretty excited about. Our copy editor found it during his turn with the pile. An old guy I won't name had contacted us out of the blue and offered us the chance to publish his rare archival photo collection, provided we treat the subject matter with the respect and seriousness he felt it deserved. To use this term and what was going to be the book's title, the photos were all anomalies. That is to say, they depicted something out of the ordinary or otherwise inexplicable. Something that usually had an equally interesting story to go along with it. Most of them were from the first half of the 20th century. Like I said, it's not the kind of thing we normally publish, but the few samples the guy sent to us, this pinch letter, were pretty compelling. And once we had seen the rest of them, heard a few stories, and realized that none of the pictures were widely known, we knew we had something that would get people's attention. The format was going to be simple and classy, with a lot of white space and breathing room. Each photo would appear as a high-quality print on the right-hand side of the page, followed by a blank left-hand page, and then a couple paragraphs to caption each photo on the following right-hand page. From the very beginning, the guy was a nightmare to work with, and the job took forever. He refused to send it in more than just one document at a time. He would send me certified mail, I would get it, scan it, and mail it back certified, and only then would he send the next one. He seemed to think that he had a very extremely valuable collection, and was hugely paranoid about losing it, so he only risked one item at a time. In the end, we spent so much money on mailing costs that it would be cheaper to fly me to where the old guy lived with a scanner on a laptop. We were maybe a third of the way through the production process when this fucking guy pulled a rug from under us. Somebody offered him a large sum of money for the photos, way more than what we were offering for the book rights, on the condition that our book got shit canned and the photos stayed out of the public eye. We demanded he would come in face to face and try to reason with him, and cater to his pride and desire for scholarly acclaim. And for a few days, it seemed like it would work. But when he got back home, he flip-flopped again, and started cursing out me and my senior editor on the phone, demanding we shelve the book. He hired a lawyer, who came up with some BS to void his contract, and then he threatened us with a lawsuit that would bankrupt us if we went ahead with the project and lost. To add insult to injury, the law firm sent this annoying little IT guy to our office to make sure the materials were wiped from our computers, because the vast majority of it existed on my machine, and I had literally spent months of my life on the project. I felt, and still feel, violated and bitter about the whole thing. Somebody should benefit from all that work, hence my reasons for coming here. Unfortunately, I don't have the high-resolution scans I made of the photos, but I did keep working drafts on the original captions and 14 medium-res placeholder thumbnails, quote-unquote, that Quark created as I was laying out the original version of the book. Don't ask me why we're still using Quark. That's what we know and what we paid for a long time ago. I'm not supposed to, but I occasionally take home the working Quark files to tweak on my home machine. The full file with the full res images embedded gets way too large and unwitty to bring home with me. Most of the time, I'm just experimenting with fonts and layout options anyway, so I don't get embedded with the images until the end. Anyway, after all this shit went down, I discovered I had a working file on my home computer of what we had done so far, so I printed to .pdf and then stripped the text and images from that PDF file. You folks will receive the benefits of that. Just to be clear, I don't claim anything with regards to the veracity and provenance of these photos. I'm not here to convince you they're real. I'm just putting them out there because I think they deserve to be seen and not hidden in some rich prick's private collection. Photo 1/14. The Collinwood Fire. This is the last known photo taken inside the Lakeview School in Collinwood, Ohio, before it was consumed by fire on March 4, 1908, killing 172 students, 2 teachers, and 1 rescuer. The fire started when a ceiling joist ignited from a nearby steam pipe. Flames blocked escape routes, leading to panic and a stampede that trapped a large number of victims in a stairwell, where they were cooked alive. Additional casualties were incurred when burning students jumped from second and third story windows. Everyone in this photo perished, except for Mr. Olson, seated at the far right in the back row. The spectral artifacts in the photo remain unexplained. Photo 2. Charlie Nolan's last interview. Charlie Nolan was an amateur folklorist who traveled throughout the South and southwestern United States during the early years of the 20th century, collecting tall tales and stories of the supernatural. According to his wife, Ellie, Charlie was told a story one day by an Oklahoma farmer about a strange woman who lived alone on an isolated property in the Panhandle. The farmer claimed that the woman was not a woman at all, but something else, something that hid its true nature behind a hard scarf, and was never seen without a large dog by its side. Nolan was apparently intrigued enough to try and search for the woman during one of his research road trips. He was never seen again. Ellie Nolan was later conducted by a Tuscaloosa pawnbroker who remembered reading about her husband's disappearance in the papers after finding his name engraved on a camera sold by someone. The pawnbroker returned the camera, and Mrs. Nolan had the film inside developed in the hopes of finding a clue as to his whereabouts. This was the only photo on the roll. Unfortunately, neither the location of the property nor the name of the farmer who told him the story was recorded in Nolan's notes. Photo 3. The Death of John Huston. This prophetically torn photograph depicts a regiment color guard of the Union Army, 1 month before they marched into the Battle of Antietam. The gentleman on the far right, named John Huston, had the right side of his face and right arm blown away by a cannon at the start of these hostilities. It is unknown exactly when the damage of the photograph occurred. Photo 4. The Axeman of New Orleans. Eduardo Marte was an unsuccessful French photographer and inventor who traveled throughout the United States during the first 2 decades of the 20th century, trying to drum up interest and investors for a device that added timer and automatic exposure features to Kodak's popular line of folding brownie cameras. During his travels, he took thousands of automatic photos to test and refine his invention. Often, he would wake up early, set up a hidden camera in his inconspicuous spot on the streets of whatever city he may happen to be in, and then walk to a nearby cafe or bar so that he can capture candid scenes of daily life to remember his travels by. Best of these photos were selected for Martel's one and only gallery show in Paris 1924. Unfortunately, Martel died penniless and unknown in 1955, and it was left to his daughter Jean to sort through the boxes and boxes of photos he left behind, to see what should have been kept and what could be discarded. During this process, she came across this photo, taken in New Orleans on the morning of October 28, 1919. a few hours before Martel boarded a steamboat and returned to France. It turns out that Martel hated motion blurs in his photographs, because he thought they would reflect badly on the speed and accuracy of his lens mechanism. This prejudice made him cast aside and overlook what was probably the most important photo he ever took. What makes this photo so special? The night before it was taken, the notorious and still identified serial killer known as the Hacksman of New Orleans had committed his last murder, hacking Mike Pickman to death in his bedroom and then fleeing the scene just as Pickman's wife was discovering the body. Could this be him returning to his residence? It's impossible to say, but if it is, the images appears to belly the legend based on the shaky testimony of Pauline and Marley Bruno and prevailing justice of the time, that only a black man was capable of such savagery. Photo 5. The Grand Caverns Cryptids. This photo was taken in 1895 by an amateur specular photographer named Orland Jeffries while exploring an unmapped section of the Grand Caverns in southwestern Virginia. At the time it was taken, Jeffries was conducting photographic experiments using super long exposures to see if anything at all could be captured in the total absence of light, otherwise known as cave darkness. He would situate himself on level ground, extinguish his lantern, and then open the lens of his homemade box camera for as long as he could stand the darkness. During one of these experiments, he heard something approach from the deeper recesses of the cave. Frightened, Jeffries abandoned his project and set off one of the blissless flashes he used for taking the traditional photos on the ground. According to the report he later gave to a local newspaper, Jeffries saw 3 humanoid creatures staring at him from the shadows and took off running in the other direction, not stopping until he was topside. Several days later, he would return with 3 other men to retrieve his box camera. This is the image that was recorded on the film inside. Photo 6. The Harlow Twins. 1938, Evergreen Park, Illinois, outside Chicago. Billy and Stevie Harlow were riding in the front seat with their mother, Tammy, with their Ford sedan, collided head-on with a crystaller. During the collision, the car spun in such a way as to impact 2 additional vehicles. Tammy and Harlow survived, but the boys were injected through the windshield and killed instantly. The crime scene photographer from the local paper took this shot as a crew of volunteers worked frantically to free John Dowling, the driver of the crystalline. It appears that little Billy and Stevie stuck around to watch. Photo 7. The Saran Tragedy. The Sarans were a Danish family who immigrated to the United States sometime between 1905 and 1906. They arrived with their eldest son, Aarons, seen on a donkey, and settled on a farmstead in Missouri. 3 more children, Simon, Frike, and Mette, center, right, and in the wagon, respectively, soon followed. This photo, taken in 1916, captures all the 4 children a few weeks before the tragedy. The 3 eldest children were apparently playing fort in the hay barn and must have fallen asleep. Their father, Nicholas, drove a wooden hay sweep into the pile and dismembered all 3, in locations accurately suggested by the flaw in the photo. Milena, the youngest one, was inside the house with her mother at the time and not hurt. According to the son of the neighbor later reviewed by the author, the donkey later died in equally hideous fashion by getting its head caught in the barbed wire fence and nearly decapitated itself in a frenzy to get free. This final detail could not be confirmed. Photo 8. The Spectre of Viola Peters. Viola Peters was a well-known spinster who lived alone in the small rural town of Mixclayson, Georgia. She was much loved in her community for charitable contributions to the Baptist church, the soup kitchen, and a local orphanage, especially during the Depression, assisted almost entirely on her largest. In July 1935, Viola was brutally raped and murdered by a drifter named Tom Cudlin, who had worked briefly at the nearby copper refinery. Cullen proceeded to stay in Viola's home and savage her corpse for an additional 17 days before he was caught and captured. A posted of enraged locals stormed the county jail, took Cullen and leached him from the old bridge over the Tokyo River. This photo was taken by Grant Killen, a witness to the lynching, and caused quite a stir when it was published a few days later in the Atlanta Constitution. To most, suggested that Viola's spirit achieved some measure of peace by attaining her killer's execution, but some twisted minds saw her in the forlorn face a longing to get one last look at her one and only lover. Photo 9. The Ghost of Sarah Utest. Denver State Hospital, formerly known as Denver State Lunatic Asylum, Kirkbride-style psychiatric hospital built in 1874 on what was then an isolated site in rural Massachusetts. Like all Kinbridge asylums, it was famous for its Gothic architecture and its use of now outdated medical equipment and techniques to treat the insane. Danvers is often cited as the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy. Danvers had several other cases of fame. It was the inspiration for the fictional Arkham Knight Sanatorium that appeared in several stories in H.P. Lovecraft, which in turn inspired the Arkham Asylum in the fictional Batman universe. It was also where the cult horror film Session 9 was filmed. That film put the vast network of tunnels beneath Danvers to its good cinematic effect. It's no accident that the filmmakers chose to use the tunnels, as rumors of their haunting had dogged Danvers for over 100 years. The most famous story concerns Sarah Eustace, a patient who escaped her rod in 1955 and snuck into the tunnel system. Despite multiple searches and a long week lockdown of the asylum, Sarah was never seen again. It was assumed she died down there, lost, thirsty, and alone. A nurse at Danvers called Gail Maloney became obsessed with Sarah's story and spent many of her off hours searching the tunnels for her remains. Though she never found a body, she did snap this photo in late 1966, which suggests Sarah Eustace walks the Danvers tunnels to this very day. Photo 10. The Stevensons family portrait. Who says ghosts don't have a sense of humor? The Stevensons were a wealthy Boston family, proud of the industry and longevity with which most of the clan was blessed. This portrait, taken in 1945, was an effort to gather the oldest Stevensons together with one of the youngest. Amelia Center, age 102, was granted the honor of matriarch, while little Ophelia was the token child at 18 months. What the Stevensons did not realize until this photo was developed was that they had been joined that day by one of the deceased, James Pullman Stevenson, 1835 to 1932, seated on the left between his niece Ginny and his cousin Alfred, was easily identified by several of those present and remembered fondly as a rascally uncle known for pranks and dirty jokes. Photo 11. Disappearances of Miss Urino. During her later years, Josephine Urino would take a walk every evening at dusk around her beloved neighborhood in Norwood, Connecticut. On November 12, 1935, she set out as usual and never returned. Extensive searches were conducted by a large team of volunteers in the Norwich police force, but no sign of her was ever found. 3 years later, Miss Urino was found squatting in front of a neighbor's house, without a mark on her body, in perfect health. When asked where she had been, Miss Urino was unable to understand the question. From her point of view, no time had passed at all. Against the advice of her neighbors and her doctor, she refused all medical treatment and resumed her life as if nothing had happened, including her nightly strolls. Another neighbor snapped this shot of her in the fall of 1938. Clouds of smoke from piles of burning leaves give it an appropriately eerie feel. On the same date in November 1940, 5 years after her initial disappearance, Miss Urino vanished again. This time, she was never seen again. Photo 12. The Fate of Sally York. The 1912 dressing of little Sally York, age 9, in the cotton loom of the North Fork Textile Mill, was one of a handful of such accidents that helped legislators push through the Keening Owning Act of 1916, the first child labor law in American history. From the time of the accident until the mill's closing 4 decades later, workers constantly complained of cold spots, strange noises, and sudden taps on the shoulder when no one was nearby. The mill's foreman never paid these complaints any mind until this photograph surfaced in 1932. It was taken by a traveling photographer named Benny Johnson, who promptly sold it to the Norfolk Gazette for an unprecedented $10. The mill had shut down for the Christmas holidays and was empty at the time. The photo was later blamed for the closing of the mill, though the Great Depression was more likely the cause of that. Photo 13. Lily Palmer's eyes. Lily Palmer was not quite 4 when she experienced what her doctors would later call acute onset of sensory hallucinations. This photo, taken by Lily's mother Angela on Halloween night 1952, purportedly captures the arrival of her disorder. Lily and her familial nanny were setting out for a round of trick-or-treating when the child suddenly screamed and began to claw at her eyes. Before she was calm enough to speak, but when asked what she saw, Lily repeatedly spoke about things crawling in her eyes. Several days later, while unsupervised in her bedroom, Lily punctured both of her eyes with one of her mother's knitting needles. After receiving medical attention and treatment, she was evaluated and committed. She remained institutionalized for the rest of her life, first at Benil on the east side of Manhattan, and later at the Rockland Psychiatric Center in Orangeburg, where she remained until she died of a sudden heart attack in March of 2001. A call to one of her former caregivers at Rockland confirmed that Lily's episodes were most traumatic on and around Halloween night. But for the majority of her life, she could be heard begging and pleading with the staff to help her get these things out of her eyes. Photo 14. The Trinity Deception. This is one of the several famous photographs taken on the first ever nuclear detonation, conducted by the US Army on July 16, 1945. In the White Sands Proving Ground, located in the Giordano de Muerto Desert, about 35 southeast of Cernio, New Mexico. The setting off of this implosive design plutonium device, the same method used in the Fat Man device dropped on Nagasaki, ushered in the atomic age and the eventual arms race between the United States and Russia. Only a handful of people were aware that this photo was cropped before it was ever released to the public, and now they are all dead. One of them was the original photographer, who gave the author a copy of the original on the condition that it would be kept out of the public eye, until such a time that the citizens of the world could handle the ramifications of what it depicts. The author remains uncertain whether this criteria has been met, but given that he likely owns the last extant copy, his society's responsibility rests with the true.